Hello, everybody. I'm Nathan, and this is my friend Boulder. We'd like to
Hello,
talk
everyone.
about. Yes, he is actually here. It's not just I. We would like to talk about the most recent Dungeons and Dragons movies, specifically Honor Among Thieves that came out recently. Just so you know, there will be spoilers. Obviously, if we're going to talk about specific moments from the movie and you haven't seen the movie yet, you can turn this off right now. Specifically, what we'd like to do is, assuming that all of our listeners have seen it, is to go through the movie and talk about moments in the movie that aren't just examples of good fantasy tropes, like, for example, a plucky band of heroes stopping quote unquote the greatest evil the world has ever known, or even examples of common player behavior, like someone saying, I could tie my rope to an X and throw it across the chasm, because I have definitely heard that in more than one session. But instead, we'd like to talk about specific points in the film that smack of DM intervention or decisions that a dungeon master might make while they're playing to help increase tension, for example, complications that will make the story more interesting, or maybe reactions to what the players are doing. Now, there's going to be a bit of bleed between good cinematography and DM complications because movies also function that way. They introduce complications into the plot that the main characters have to deal with. And at the same time, D&D and role-playing campaigns in general often follow the structure of movies because it is often a very visually presented medium, at least in the way people can use the theater mind or see it in their head. Oftentimes, dungeon masters will say, they'll make references to a movie to explain what something looks like. So they often use some of the same tricks of the trade that movies do to have the story progress along and to increase tension. So there's going to be a bit of bleed, but we'd like to point out a few specific moments that just reek of things that we have experienced or done ourselves. All right. Did you have anything to add before I started?
No, unless you want to introduce your GMing experience and this sort of thing.
Well, okay, I suppose. I actually started playing 3.5. Okay, this is going to be referencing specifically Dungeons and Dragons. One, because that's topical, and also because that's what I have most experience with. I started playing back in about 2005 because my wife said I'd be a good DM, and I was like, pfft. But after I tried, I couldn't stop because it really is quite engaging, a lot of fun. It's like telling a story, but you're only telling half of it, and the players are telling the other half. So I've actively DM'd on and off for at least the last 10 years, and definitely on for the past 3.5 or so. And Balder here is, in fact, one of my players, but he also DMs.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about that? Because so far, it's just been me.
I'm also basically on the same boat as you. I've started in 3.5 a while back. I've been a player for a good chunk of time. Then I started to do. I did one or two long form campaigns, and after that, I found that I have more taste for being an occasional GM and do either one shots or a limited scope campaign, something that would be a bit too big to be called a one shot, but definitely not a level 1 to 20 ongoing story progression type of deal. In this case, we're going to talk, as you said, about Dungeons and Dragons because that's what the movie is about. But I've also been interested in a lot of different other systems, some with more rules, some with more freeform storytelling, and there's still stuff that should be relevant. I'll try to focus on the D&D stuff for that specific recording.
Yeah, a lot of what we'll say here does apply to most other RPGs because most other RPGs are not player initiated, but those do exist. Me personally, I'm more of a forever DM trademark myself because I find that when I'm a player, I get really antsy waiting the next 20 minutes until my turn comes around again. Whereas when you're the DM, you're constantly interacting with the world and constantly shaping what's going on. I find that just much more engaging. So, but everybody has their own taste. Okay, so these are not going to be in chronological order. These are just things that I felt like would make sense introduced in a particular order. The first thing that really stuck out to me, the most obvious instance of a direct DM intervention, to the point where it's not even good cinematography, but it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to things that happen at a real table, is when Simon realized that the walking staff that Hoba had with him was a hither-thither staff when they accidentally destroyed the complicated puzzle that the DM had probably stayed up all night working on.
Yes. So I have gripes about that. I'd say my first gripe as a DM is I find that it's very easy to paint yourself in a corner when you create an entire action sequence in your brain that you think, oh, my player are going to do this, are going to do that, and then they're just going to do all of those things step by step, and then they fail on the first step on a way that is entirely unrecoverable. And so it all falls apart, and you need to get yourself out of that specific pickle and redesign the entire sequence on the fly. In this case,
Yep.
yeah.
Go ahead.
In this case, it's a bit heavy-handed with the hither stuff, and if we consider the entire action of the movie as a scenario that happened at the table, it keeps getting used later in the film, and as the DM, you would not have expected that item to be in play for all of the rest of the sequence, and so it throws a bit of a spanner in the wrench.
Oh, that's my second point. We will get to that. Okay. But yeah,
Okay.
I've experienced that myself when I was a beginning DM. You have an idea of how things should go, and that's a very bad mindset to be in. I found that a healthier mindset to be in as a DM is you create the interesting situations, they create the solutions. So hopefully they come up with solutions that you haven't thought of. You should have at least one or two in mind, but if they've come up with an additional one, that's what the game's about. So yeah, it sounds like the DM had a very particular solution in mind, which was emphasized by the fact that Xenk has basically a 2-paragraph long instruction list of what to do before Simon accidentally fudges it. But then,
And
as a DM,
at least 2 paragraph long, because we never actually hear the end.
It definitely did sound like a gnome contraption, though. So yeah, the DM would be like, "Oh no, now I got to get him across the chasm, and tying a rope to an axe isn't going to cut it." So, oh, why don't you roll Arcana on that item that you happen to have in your backpack? So yeah, as from the standpoint of a movie, it seems like a cop out. If this was simply an action fantasy movie, that would have been a poor plot hole. In a D&D movie, it makes sense because they're referring to things that happen a lot at the table.
You can also see it the other way. Not quite Chekhov gun, but a way to introduce a problem-solving tool that the movie actually want to use in later. But speaking about that gnomish contraption, I think a fun thing to talk about as DMs is how would you make that specific obstacle work as an in-game object, because I have thought about that, because the biggest gripe I have with that bridge is it has a failure condition that the DM design that entirely halts the adventure. As a DM myself, I feel I would have given that consequences for failure that are either annoying or debilitating to the players, but don't necessarily transform the entire thing into an immediate roadblock. Maybe you get teleported to the start and you take the XD8 or XD6 shock damage or something like that. Something where the player have some wiggle room for failure, and they can still interact with it even if they fail.
The biggest issue with that bridge is it's an all or nothing thing, based around what it looks like maybe 1 or 2 rolls. Now, as you recall, I actually did have a bridge like that in the campaign that you played in, and it wasn't an all or nothing.
It was mostly trolling.
Well, it wasn't an all or nothing. You know, if you miss, you don't fall off the bridge or immediately die. But yeah, some sort of trap would go off that would debilitate you or hurt you or slow you down. So there were consequences, especially since you're using resources that you might need to use later. But, you know, there's different degrees of success. You can get through it without tripping a single trap, or you could trip them all. And you were definitely trying.
that go for all kind of obstacles, not just bridges. If you have anything that the players need to go through, I feel it's good form to have multiple way to get through already
Uh-huh.
built in. Even if the player do something entirely unexpected and find their own way across your obstacles, having
Uh-huh.
more than one way to cross it built in and
Uh-huh.
being open to the player doing something new,
Uh-huh.
I think
There should
is just a much better approach.
there should be at least one that you have in mind, so that if they get stuck, you can propose it. But yeah, more than
Yeah.
one in mind is a good design. Speaking of which, after they get the Hither Thither staff, which is a legendary item that was introduced with the movie into
Mhm.
official stats, um, they do
It's
begin
definitely
using it
not a
everywhere.
portal gun because, yeah,
Of
it's
course not.
definitely not a
It
portal
definitely
gun
did
because
not.
they would need to pay
Was
royalty
one
on
of them
that.
was orange, right? One of them would have
Yeah,
been orange, but they were both blue, so it was obviously was not.
I actually double checked the color on second closer look.
I had heard someone say that it even had the same sound as a portal gun. I can't verify that, but it's definitely the first thing on everyone's
It,
mind.
okay,
So
it's not entirely the same sound, as in they didn't use the
entirely,
exact same source file, but it is exact. Okay, I
evocative.
think yes, I think that that's on purpose actually because
Oh,
it's
there
the
was
kind of
plenty of
thing
things that were in purpose.
in a movie you want your audience to do that immediate association. Hey, yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's a portal gun, even if they're not making it conscientiously in their brain. You
Mhm.
want the concept uh, of the portal to just be, oh yeah, okay, I know what that is, I know how it's supposed to function. And
Right.
I'll even say that it's a very I'm going to make a very quick tangent out of the intended topic. Having played Portal, the very, very, very first thing you do in Portal is step through a portal into another portal that is in the same frame. And they're using
Mhm.
that exact same scene composition to communicate to the audience that those two places that are not adjacent are linked by that portal.
Right. I think that in
I don't know if they
cinematography,
copied the scene. Yeah, I don't know if they copied it on purpose or if it's just the most efficient way to explain that mechanic to the audience.
I'm not a
Please.
cinematographer, but I believe there's a term called visual language or something very close to that, where they quickly bring something up in someone's mind by giving a visual metaphor. Like, for example, I saw an example with Clash of the Titans. Someone kneel to pray, which is not something an ancient Greek would do, but it immediately tells the audience what that person is doing and why.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly.
there's definitely that. But they start cheesing all the obstacles with Portal Gun, like the a plan with the carriage and the art portrait, for example. And it gets to the
Yeah,
point where the
exactly.
GM's like, I can't let you cheese everything with this portal gun. Can you imagine having that inside the Coliseum, for example? Or in the final fight. They would have been using it in place of their separate skills and talents. So it got to the point
Yes.
where he basically has to take it away from them.
And I'll also point out something there. They the way they've been using the Ether teaser stuff in the action of the movie is somewhat underutilized compared to the amount of complete nonsense player would get into that
Anyone
because
who's played Portal, yeah.
yeah, I mean let me just say it is a port city. There is an ocean just right there,
Mhm.
and they established before the last fight that yes, the staff has enough range to be fired from the ocean on a boat to
Mhm.
above the city.
Mhm.
Wink, wink,
Right,
not nudge.
right,
I
yeah.
do not know a table of player that would not absolutely abuse that.
So this is an example of the DM getting themselves out of a sticky situation by saying, "Oh, you have this special item," and then not foreseeing, not looking ahead to realize that the players are going to start using that special item every time, every chance they can get.
Yes.
So
You,
that I
I,
believe would. Mhm. Go
yeah,
ahead.
actually, as a DM, you can fix that even after giving it to them. If you realize that, wait, I gave them something that is going to break the entire campaign going forward. you just let them use it once or twice. Once for in the intended use. Second, because they found a cool way to use it to escape that dragon. Fine, you let them have it. But after they did that dragon thing, you let the character that have it knows. But suddenly you feel the power diminishing inside, and it sounds like it's going to need some time to recharge. And
Yeah,
then
the DM did that with the Helmet of Disjunction. According to the stats, it can only be used once, and then it takes 1d4 days to recharge. So they obviously learned their lesson by the time they gave the Helmet of Disjunction.
I actually had a different read on the helmet because it entirely disappeared from the movie after being used. It just no one has it in hand. It's not showing up in any scene. At least that I can't remember seeing it
It's
at all.
there somewhere. It's just not important. It's kind of like the player that doesn't show up to a session.
Yeah,
They're there, but they're just in the background.
exactly. So my,
So
my read was my read was they actually forgot about it after that scene. It's not there because nobody remembered it's there.
Right. So I was leading up to the point of, I believe the DM wasn't quite sure of how to handle the staff, and so he had the painting fall over in the treasure room. So like, oh, it looks like you're gonna have to find another way in. And Dork's player is like, nope, I'm fixated. I'm gonna get through this thing one way or another. So yeah.
Absolutely. And that also introduced something as a DM that you don't want to see most of the time, which is splitting the party. Where she stays at the hotel trying to get through the portal. Then Elgin goes to try and find his daughter on the top of the castle. Olga gets stuck in a brawl with the guards, and Simon gets himself separated, going to the vault door. And then everyone is in their own place. As a DM, this is a nightmare because when you have all of your players in the same place at the same time, you already need to juggle them so that no one feels entirely left out of the action and start reading their phone or something. When they are in actual different places, you can't. As a GM myself, I find it extremely difficult to multitask in my brain multiple story situation at the same time. So what I have to do is actually focus on one of the situation, either resolve it or move it forward along that I can say enough time has moved forward on your side. Let's see what XYZ is up to in the meantime.
Right, which is, you can tell in the movie, the DM realizes this, that everyone's in a different place, and he's got to get them, or he has to get them back together. So they're like, that's it, Everard's black tentacles everywhere, which doesn't actually make sense. Sophina couldn't see the other people, so how did she cast black tentacles on them? So this was very much a heavy-handed railroading encounter.
The way I read that one is magic glyph, or contingency on the ground, something like that, where because the vault is obviously a trap. The vault is a trap in multiple ways. It's a trap for the adventurers because Forge expect them to cause trouble. It's a trap for the rich people to get them to separate themselves from their valuables. So because you don't expect anybody that is not an antagonist to you to be in that vault, you just booby trap it. You booby trap with whatever your highly powerful mage advisor has, and if that's a contingency spell with some black tentacles, why not?
Although that's the only time you see that spell, and it all happens at the same time. Regardless, you can tell that was the point where the DM said, "Okay, that's it. I'm stopping right here. You guys are going to have to be in the Coliseum now." It sounded like they had designed this encounter for the past week and had a whole bunch of cute little things lined up, and they were going to get them in that Coliseum one way or the other.
That is fair. I have actually a slightly different read on that scene. Because what you say is very believable. That's something I can definitely see happen at the table. But the way I actually read that is one of my player is 1v1ing a red wizard that is 10 level too high for them to even consider fighting, and the red wizard is already shapeshifted into someone they don't suspect. So okay, that one is going to be finger of death immediately. That's not even a fight. The other two are restrained in a vault. There's 20,000 guard outside, and the vault is only one way in. Even if they get out of the trap, they're going to get entirely massacred by the entire retinue that is converging on their position. And number four actually is not in a bad spot. Roll me a perception check. Yeah, not high enough. You get knocked out cold. Okay, fine.
I don't even care what it is.
Yeah, I mean, she get knocked out by essentially an unnamed NPC that, from a storytelling point of view, is you failed a perception check and you're knocked out. Yeah, don't worry about it. But what I actually read that is I actually TPK'd my party. But I don't want the
for those who are
campaign to
not
end.
familiar with, means total party kill. Accidentally killed.
Yeah. I actually did not balance my encounter in a way that allowed my party to escape or win or be in a situation where they can organically continue forward, and therefore I'm going to say, well, they're not going to kill you. They want to see you suffer. So, okay, and throw them in a coliseum. It's helped by the fact that Elgin's player is actually throwing that lifeline to the GM, and then the GM is just grabbing it with both hands, essentially.
Right. Yeah, that's also a perfectly valid way of looking at it. Moving on to another topic, Zenk, I believe, was definitely a DM creation. He would be what most people would call a DM NPC or a Dungeon Master's non-player character. Probably an old character that the DM himself played back in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons back in the 80s and 90s, and he wanted to show his players how cool his old character was and how it was actually done. So he's given an opportunity to face off against a bunch of undead mercenaries and completely, slaughter them to the point where they say, well, I'm glad he's on our side, which is kind of, in character speak for, well, he's several levels above us. So he fought them with a solo fight. He definitely had higher stats than they did. He managed to give them a lore dump about what happened during the original use of the big bad evil guy's legendary artifact, what the helmet is and how to get to the helmet, how to get past the traps. And at the very end, he doesn't actually stick around to help them fight the big bad evil person because he doesn't want to steal all the players' thunder. This is their campaign, not his. So he, even though it's kind of a plot hole, in a real fantasy story, he would stick around and help them all the way. In this story, nope. He's got to go off now. He's got to straight line walk his way down the coast because, it's up to the players now.
Right. You also forget that just before meeting him, every character rolls a history check to see if they know who that Zen character is. They all succeed except the bard.
Except for Edgen, he gets like a 2.
And then they all, oh yeah, he helped my tribe fight whatever. And I think he fought off a beholder with a sharpened gourd.
Right.
How does that even work?
I hear that's a reference to a Wick movie. I've not actually seen it. I hear that's a reference.
Oh, really?
Which would make sense because he's kind of like a John Wick character of the D&D movie. But yeah, it's basically
fair enough.
Basically, in play, that would be the DM telling the players, you've heard the name Zenk, and they're like, well, what do I know about this player? And he's like, well, you've heard that, and then he tells each of them, like, he once, fought with a tribe to, et cetera, et cetera. He gives each of the specific players something cool that perhaps his own player character did back in AD&D because he's in love with his old character.
Definitely. And so you even also have the intro sequence where he actually show up on screen doing essentially a messiah moment, saving a baby from a predatory fish.
Oh yeah.
Yep. I hesitate to throw the term Marty stew around because it's generally misapplied, but I think they were intentionally going for that vibe with that character.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess it's a reference to a movie philosophy. There's a book called Save the Cat that talks about like strategies to use in making movies. So it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference to that as well.
I see.
Um, Another
So
thing that go ahead.
speaking about DMPCs,
Mhm.
the trouble with DMPCs generally is as a DM, you are not the focus of the action. The players are essentially telling the story, and what you're doing most of the time is setting the scene, giving them opportunity to flex their character trait and advance their characters' story, give them chance to interact in meaningful ways with the world, giving them chance to go after their goal, or giving them some way to be challenged on their goals. If you have, as you just said, that DMPC there that is not supposed to be the focus of the story, and that is essentially able to resolve the story all by himself. In campaign, you'd need a way to justify them not just going for the big bad evil guy by themselves immediately. Most most stories I've been in where a DM had that kind of NPC had them either preoccupied with a bigger threat where no, I cannot go and help you because if I leave this place, the volcano is going to erupt and destroy the city. I need to focus my magical energy on this, or I am constantly locked in the battle of will with that evil entity from the outer planes.
Or they're off to go summon the Riders of Rohan.
Something like that. And I thought I thought a bit strange that they didn't go for something similar, like um, with you could justify it very easily with a red wizard already in Neverwinter. I must go warn the Harpers. I have no time to stay and help you. The other city of the Sword Coast must be protected, and it would just be a throwaway line, and it would remove that as a plot point and just be, yeah, okay, it's just fine.
As
It's
I,
an excuse, but I get what
yeah.
you're throwing that way.
I believe I've only seen the movie once. I believe he did put out a line about, I must not interfere. This is your fight, or some words to that effect, which is pretty much what the DM says at that point, anyway.
He told them, "I given you the tool and the knowledge, and now it is your quest." Something like that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All right. So one little thing I wanted to point out. I suppose this would be more noticeable to people who have actually been in infiltration missions. At one point, Dork is wild shape as a fly, which automatically makes her a pretty high druid to begin with. So she's eavesdropping on the Sophina and Forge and the
And the
rich
rich.
nobles,
Yeah.
right? Learning about the protections when Sophina, in my reading, cast detect magic and realized that there was a wild shaped person in the vault.
Definitely. And
That
she would not
Go ahead.
have casted it before
Mhm.
because she saw Fina with her markings, which means that she was in a room either when Forge opened the door or before that, before Sophina put her cowl back on her face. So at that point, she would have been in range of detect magic, but she was not detected, so Sophina must not have had detect magic on at that point.
Yeah, and I also interpreted that she didn't use true seeing because it took her a second to figure out what was tripping her radar. The thing that stuck out to me as a DM intervention was as soon as Dork started fleeing the castle, suddenly every guard in the city not only knew that there's an infiltrator, but that it was a druid and that they should be shooting at any animal. In fact, specifically the right animal at all times. There's a rat, everybody shoots at the rat. There's a bird, everybody shoots at the bird. There's a cat, everybody starts chasing the cat. Which is, in a game, that's the DM kind of getting fed up with someone wild shaping their way through everything and just having the guards chasing them. It's a bit, what's the word she used? Arbitrary. for that to happen. It keeps the tension going in the story. It keeps the tension going on the table, but it's a little bit, it doesn't make as much sense for the guards to have that kind of telepathy.
I see it in two ways as a GM there. First, you want to signify to the player that you did get information, but that plan is now over, and we're going to resume the main plot because I have those three other guys sitting there that are starting to consider looking at their phones or ordering a pizza or something.
Right.
And you can also see it in plot as Sofina is a very high level wizard. It would not be unreasonable for her to direct, let's say, 10, 20 guards with a telepathic message or something like that. That's a possibility. And she also absolutely used a dimension door or other form of mid-range teleportation to get herself from the top of a castle to the street. Because Doric is actually kind of in the clear when she gets in the street from her big fall down until she actually make eye contact with Sofina on a horse. Who has gone to the street level, and from there on, and from there on, Sofina has direct eyesight on her up to the point where she actually get out of the city. What I don't explain to myself actually is Sofina is clearly teleporting all over the place. She have all sort of teleport options. She have Misty Step. She have Dimension Door. She have all the good stuff. But as soon as Doric is out of the city gates, she just stops pursuing, which as a GM, it makes sense. Okay, you've escaped. I'm not going to go further than that because as far as the sequence is concerned, that's a good sequence and we can stop there. But if you think about it in universe, she would have had options, is what I'm saying.
Right. It's probably Sophia saying, "Oh no, she's outside the city. Oh dear me." Probably something like that.
Yeah. Oh, to be fair, since
that was a pun. It was a pun. Dear me. All right. I shouldn't have to point these out. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the name Jarnathan. Actually, it didn't stick out unless you're reading subtitles or looked at the movie later. But the Aarakocra in the council at the beginning was actually Jarnathan. So it was a regular, almost pedestrian name for real life that was changed just enough so that it could be fantasy-like. That's something that pretty much every DM has done when people say, okay, I'm inside the tavern, I'm going to go up and I'm going to talk to the barkeep. Okay, what's the barkeep's name? Jimothy. You have to come up with something on the spot. So you take the first thing on your mind, but you have to change a little bit so that it's fantasy style.
Definitely. One thing on my side is I actually thought the name was Jonathan, like the actual real world name Jonathan, until the end credits, because with the accent and the delivery of the line and everything, I was just, it's kind of flubbing the name, but it still sounds like a Jonathan. I thought the joke was it's an Aarakocra. That's a fantasy creature that you would not expect to see in your everyday life, and it has an extremely pedestrian name. Okay, that's funny.
Yeah. Also, it was one of the director's first names, Jonathan Goldstein. So it's like the DM picking his name and just kind of twisting it slightly because he was on the spot.
Yeah, but as you said, I think every DM had that situation where the players start to interact with the NPC that you put there for flavor because it's a tavern, so there's going to be some gamblers, there's going to be an old guy reading his newspaper in a corner, there's some waste stuff. Wait, I want to talk to that old guy. Okay, he's wearing fisherman clothes and he seems to be wizard. Okay, I want to ask him his name. Okay, he's
Julian.
Yeah.
And there's a goblin named Boblin.
Boblin.
Yes.
Boblin, the good old Boblin the Goblin.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So these are all
And
things that I noticed in the movie that felt like something I would have experienced or something I've literally done as a game master, as a dungeon master in my games. Is there? Do you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
as a game master, specifically, no, I could riff on a lot of things that I would have done differently, but it's it's very easy to be a critic, and obviously in this case they needed to make the story not just an adaptation of. I think they did a very good job of making an adaptation of the feel of a
Right.
tabletop session, rather
Right.
than trying to go the route that would not have worked and go for an adaptation of the mechanics of the game.
Right.
Imagine the same
Or
movie.
even, yeah, or even, for example, an adaptation of R.A. Silvertore's novels. It would feel like a
Yeah,
generic fantasy novel that or story that's been done in movie form for
yeah, exactly.
pretty. So yeah, getting the
I-
feel of it was definitely that was important. Getting the tone right, and they definitely got the tone. A lot of the dialogue felt lifted straight from the table. Like, you want to kill my daughter with an arrow? It could miss. I have heard that. So,
yes, that kind of harebrained scheme.
yeah.
Also, speaking of stuff at the table that really stuck out to me, Zank
Uh-huh.
being played by let's say DM or player, doesn't
Uh-huh.
matter, but being played by someone who is way more into role playing than the rest of the party is. You just have that feel that the rest of the party is kind of there for like the Saturday night D&D with pizza and friends.
Uh-huh.
They're there for the social experience, right? They're
Right. Yeah.
interested in the story, but they're not larpers. They're not going to go and wear an actual chainmail just to be in character. And then
Right.
you've Zenk, and Zenk is
Right.
I
I
do
do
not
not
traffic
partake.
in
Yeah, I do not. I do
colloquialism.
not traffic in colloquialisms. I will not be implicit in the illicit use of ill-gotten booty. Yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
a sentence that I've said almost word for word in your campaign.
yeah, he is the Ren Fair role player. You can see him in full regalia out. Not
Absolutely,
not using any anachronisms in his speech. Yeah, he's definitely the
absolutely.
serious, super serious role player. So yeah,
Yes,
they
yes.
definitely nailed the tone of the of playing D&D, but not just playing D&D, but also DMing D&D, which was the focus of our little talk together.
Yeah, a very very small thing to finish, but I find it a very great example of the okay, I'll allow it as a GM.
Right.
The Elga's character has been eating potatoes at people the entire movie. I think
Mm-hmm.
she started by throwing one at the console when they escape, and
Mm-hmm.
there is potato action all the way down until the very last scene with
Mm-hmm.
just before they leave the boat with the boat,
Right.
and everyone has currently surrendered their weapons. They're trying to
Right.
talk the character down, and then Helga's player at the table is, I want to look around and find
Mm-hmm.
a potato. And then the GM is, are we kind of in the middle of something right now? I guess roll me perception, and not 20. Okay, well I allow it. You find a basket of potatoes.
Mm-hmm. Right. She definitely had proficiency in improvised weapon. I think
Oh,
she
absolutely,
used
absolutely.
improvised weapons more than her axe during the entire movie.
Yeah, she
But yeah.
hit like three things with the axe, and that's like the dragon statue 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah, she dropped the axe in the forge, and then it was everything else, like bows and
Yeah, bows, shields, helmets,
yeah,
good
right,
old fisticuffs,
yeah,
chains.
right,
Uh, she definitely have the tavern brawler feat.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, I definitely enjoyed the movie. I'd love to see it again if I could. And if anyone here hasn't seen it, I would wonder why you would listen to this whole thing and you haven't seen it. So anyway, go see it again.
Absolutely, and I have actually seen it twice because Miss M. Boulder wanted to see it, and she
Mm.
had an interest to see it with the 4D stuff, with the wind and the water
Mhm.
and all
Right.
the shaky seat and everything.
Right.
My recommendation is see it in a regular movie. The picture quality is better, and you don't get annoying wind blast to the face all the time. So,
Did
regular
she enjoy
movie
it?
best. Oh, she had a great time, and
Mm.
she, as a person who is absolutely not in that type of content or gaming circles, she thought the story itself was very decent.
Mhm.
She wouldn't call it like the best movie she ever
Mm.
seen, of course, but
Right.
she had a great time. She didn't know anything about the franchise, and all of the small nods and Easter eggs that you see
Mhm.
from time to time did not distract her at all, because if you
Mm.
know it's there, then it's a good plus. But if you don't know it, it's
Mhm.
intrusive.
Right.
One good example, we're talking about the portrait that they use for Portal
Right.
Heist.
Mhm.
I'm 99% sure that's Volo from
Yeah, it
Volo's
was
Guide to
Volo.
Monster.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you don't know it, it doesn't. Yeah, okay, it's just a portrait of a rich guy. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Like for example, my wife, in a recent interaction, I showed her Volo from a Baldur's Gate 3 game. And I said, "This is Volo. Does that sound familiar?" And she's like, "Isn't that the guy who wrote the book?" And I'm like, "Ding, ding, ding." So she's not incredibly familiar, but being
I
able
used the
to
portrait
swap,
from the
right,
MTG card to illustrate the point.
right, okay. Well, anyway, thanks for coming. I had a lot of fun talking. I hope that
Same,
the
same.
one other person who listens to this enjoys it as well. All right. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Okay.
Have a good time and see you next time.
Yeah, you too.